Timesheets are accessed from the staff menu, Timesheet. Once this opens, you can choose week. Here we're going to look at week beginning the 19th. The timesheet is colour coded as follows. If you make any manual change to an entry, it will turn pink to show that the manual change has been made. If an entry is shown as blue on the timesheet, this indicates that it is snap to shift. Snap to shift means that the employee clock-in times match the shift time definitions set up to their main position, as well as the timesheet rota settings, which provide rules for snap to shift, such as early in, late out, etc. Amber shifts indicate that it is not snap to shift. All these must be manually checked and the value edited if necessary. On the left of the timesheet are all your employees, as well as their main position. After this, there are 3 columns. W stands for work hours, S stands for standard hours, and E stands for extra hours. The standard hours plus the extra hours will equal the worked hours. You can view the detail for each shift by clicking on the shift value. Once this opens, you will see that there's the name of the person displayed in the top left. If you clicked on this, it would take you to their staff record. Also displayed is the date of the shift, then the number of standard hours, a field where you can add any extra hours worked and other hours worked. If you make any manual changes, you could give the reason in the notes page. It'll show their clock in and clock out times. The employee's main position would display on the right hand side in the drop down menu, and if they had any extra positions, by clicking on the drop down menu, this would then be listed. If you've made any changes, you can then click the Save button and these changes will be saved. If the employee's clock in and out times match one of their main job position shift times set up in shift definitions, and it is also within tolerance of the rota settings, then the shift will snap to shift. This will show blue on the timesheet. Any breaks set within the definitions will be automatically deducted, and therefore the shift times minus break times will show as the standard hours in the timesheet. Any timesheet entries that are shown as snap to shift, i.e. blue on the timesheet, should very rarely need changing. The only reason to edit blue snap to shift entries are the employee is not working in their main job and instead is working in one of the extra roles that you have given them. It may be that it is an overtime shift and you may need to change standard hours to extra hours. Here are the shift definitions for a care assistant within Oak House. If an employee with care assistant as their main job role clocks in or out and it matches any one of these definitions, as well as the tolerances set up within their timesheet rota configuration, then it will snap to shift, and the standard hours displayed will be the definitions less any break deductions indicated on the right hand side of the definitions screen. The level of deduction would be calculated from the break deduction settings, and these are accumulative. For instance, if the shift lasted 8 hours or above, the break would be 15 plus 30, which is an hour's deduction. As you can see with this example, this care assistant has hours payable of 7.5 and it has snap to shift. By clicking on the shift, you see that this has been paid as standard hours. Altogether, the employee was on site 8 hours 44, having clocked in at 8:20 and clocked out at 17:04. The shift definition that this is matched to is 8:30 to 1700, which is 8 hours 30 work time, less 1 hour deduction for breaks, as the shift was over 8 hours. The remaining 14 minutes are accounted by the employee coming in 10 minutes early prior to shift and leaving 4 minutes after the end of the shift. This 14 minutes is accounted in the rota setup rules, which we're going to look at now. Early in, late out minutes are ignored for pay purposes, and it would be the shift definition less breaks that would be paid. The rota timesheet configuration settings are found in Home Setup and Settings. We'll now look at each of these fields and how it may affect timesheet results. The two simplest settings to understand are the before shift starts and the after shift ends. Most staff will clock on before they are due to start. Here the before shift start has been entered as 30 minutes. This means that the employee could clock on anything up to 30 minutes before the shift and it would still snap the shift. If they clocked on even earlier than this, it would not snap the shift and it would show as amber on the timesheet. Similarly, the after shift ends is being set to 20 minutes. This means for a shift that normally finishes at 1700, an employee could stay in to 1720 before they clock out and the shift would still snap the shift. However, if they clocked out 1721 or later, again it would not snap the shift and show as amber. The next two settings we're going to look at are after shift start and before shift ends, which have both been set to 5 minutes. This accounts for late in and early out. Therefore, if the shift was due to start at 8:30, an employee could arrive anything up to 8:35, which is 5 minutes late, and it would still snap the shift and the deduct rules would not apply. Similarly, if before shift ends was set to 5, a staff member to clock out up to 5 minutes early, so 16:55 up to 1700, again it would still snap the shift and the deduct rules would not apply. Next is the snap the shift time limit, which in this case is set to 30 minutes. This is the limit to which somebody could come in late or leave early and the shift would still snap the shift. For instance, if the shift started at 8:30 and the after shift start was set to 5 minutes, the snap the shift limit would be 8:35 up to 9:05. If the employee clocked in after this time, again it would show as amber for manual check-in and not snap the shift. Likewise, if it was 1700 when the shift ends and the before shift ends was set as 5 minutes, if the employee left 16:25 up to 1700, it would still snap the shift blue. If they went out before 4:25, it would display as amber for manual check-in. Although it snaps the shift, deduct rules for late in and early out would still apply if these have been set. Finally, we have the deduct rules for late in and early out. If somebody is late after the 5-minute grace period, therefore 8:30 plus 5 minutes is 8:35, this is what would be deducted, which is 15 minutes. If somebody was early out before the shift ends, before the 5-minute grace period of 5:25, then again this value would be deducted. Finally, I've wrote the doc minutes. This comes in effect if somebody was either late in or early out and it didn't snap the shift. You must make sure if you use the deduct minutes setting for lateness and early out that this is written into their contracts. There are also some tick boxes on the bottom left of the rota timesheet configuration. The first tick box is use extra hours to split shift. If this was ticked, each split shift would use the extra hours box on the timesheet rather than the standard hours. If the all shift break at midnight was ticked, any shift that went from one day into another or night shift would be shown as 2 entries, one up to midnight and one after midnight. This would be very useful if you had a different pay rate before midnight and after midnight for any particular day. However, a drawback of this would be that every split shift would be shown this way and you would have 2 entries for every shift. Using this would depend on your pay rules and how you wanted to configure your timesheet. Stop the preset shift times means it would check the clock-ins against the preset shift times set in the position definitions. If the link absence to rota was ticked, instead of entering the absence hour within the calendar, this would be preset from the rota rather than being entered into the calendar manually. Some key points for the rota timesheet configuration. If you're a migrating customer, your original settings will be copied from Coolcare 3. If you're a new customer, your Coolcar 4 trainer will assist you in deciding which settings work for your needs. Whichever of these points is true, check all shifts on your timesheet carefully after the first setup to ensure the rules are performing as expected. If you get some unexpected results, we would advise you to contact Coolcar support or your designated trainer so they can investigate and make any little tweaks that would help your situation. Timesheet entries will not snap the shift if they do not match the main job shift time position definitions for an employee, or they do not conform to the rota timesheet configuration settings. If the shifts do not snap the shift, they will show as amber on the timesheet, which is a visual indicator to say that they must be checked. You can then override any hours that are incorrect to ensure that the pay run will be correct. When checking the not snap the shift values, think of the 5 R's. Make sure it's the right date, the right employee, the right position, the right hours with the right rate. Check the hours are correct. Also, if it is a secondary job, ensure that you change the main job to the employee extra position. Also remember, break rules are not enforced when it does not snap the shift. Therefore, you must manually deduct any unpaid break values from the standard total. If latest deductions have been applied and are correct, do not overwrite the deduction. If it has not snapped the shift because of an employee clocking error, fix the clocking error first, otherwise subsequent entries will also be incorrect. Check that the shifts should all be paid at standard rate, or if there are extra hours or other hours, make sure that these are indicated on the timesheet. Also, if training, absence and sickness totals have been applied from the calendar, ensure the total hours paid, i.e. standard hours plus calendar hours, do not exceed the shift duration. Initially, shifts on this timesheet will either show as blue or amber. As previously seen in the video, the blue ones should be correct. By clicking on it, the only things you may have wished to change on this when you were checking it is if he was not working as a care assistant but working in one of his other roles, you would then click on this and change the job role. Also, if he was working overtime, rather than working standard hours, he was going to get extra hours paid for it. You could have changed that to 0 and 7.5. Save the changes, and you will now see, because we've changed it to overtime, it is pink to say there's been a manual change. E highlights that it is extra hours. You can also see here now on the left hand side, 19.5 hours worked, 12 of which is standard hours, 7.5 as extra hours. If it doesn't snap the shift, it will show as amber. When we click on this, you will see that the hours present was 6:30 in the morning to 6:30 in the evening of 12 hours. You also need to deduct whatever break entitlement is unpaid. In this case, for the 12-hour shift, he has a 1 hour unpaid break. Therefore, the payable hours need adjusting to 11 hours and saved. Again, this will indicate pink to say there's been a manual change. Also, if you wish, you can add a reason for the manual change. Simply type the reason into the notes page. Once you're finished, select save, and that would be then saved to view at any time. In this example, I've used manual clocks to recreate a clocking error by an employee. The first indication that you have a clocking error will appear on the timesheet, and if it shows a particularly long shift, it normally indicates that an employee has not clocked out or clocked in correctly. If we click on this shift, you will see that the clock-in times are 7:45 and clock-out times are 7:50. 40. This employee's normal shift is 8 o'clock to 2000. To check the times, click on the employee name and go to I button settings. When checking the clock in history, you can see that they clocked in at 7:45, but there's a clock out missing for 2000. This has caused all the subsequent clocks to be incorrect. What we must do is check what time the employee went out and then add a manual clock for that particular time. For the 20th of the 11th at 2000. Save this. All subsequent clocks will also reset, and when we return to the timesheet, you'll now see that the shifts are separated correctly but are showing in amber. As in the previous example, you must check these totals and, if necessary, deduct breaks. Here the timesheet is now correct. This has been a two-stage process. First of all, to get the shifts to show correctly, and then to further edit the times to ensure that the manual changes have been made to reflect the breaks. If training occurs during the shift, sometimes the timesheet would need to be adjusted to account for this. Here is an employee who has carried out 2 hours training within her shift. When we go at the timesheet, you will see that she is being paid for 13 hours. By opening this, you can see the training hours are set to 2 and standard hours are 11. She should only be paid 11 hours in total. Therefore, the training hours should be deducted from the standard hours. So it's 9 hours standard hours, 2 training hours, and an hour's unpaid break because of the break rules. Save that, and it will now read correctly. If ever you enter absence, holidays or training within the calendar and you enter the wrong total here, you cannot edit it within the timesheet, but instead you must return to the calendar, open up the event. Once this event has been opened, you can then edit it. Here the event was wrongly entered as 2 hours. It was actually a 1 hour training course. Make the changes and save it. When you go back to the timesheet, you'll see that this says 1 hour, and we'll pay the employee 10 hours to make sure the 11 hours is still correct. Timesheets should be checked every day. Once they've been checked, they should then be locked. Here it's been locked up to the 28th, which is signified by a padlock. Once the 29th is checked and you wish to lock that, simply click on the padlock, enter the 29th and update. And the padlock will appear to indicate that that is now locked. If you wish to unlock a timesheet and make a change, you can simply click on the timesheet, change the date again to the 28th, and this will unlock the 29th. Remember to check your timesheets daily where possible. Make changes to snap to shift if it's an extra position or extra hours. Check all amber, not snap to shift values. Manually deduct breaks from these if they have not snapped to shift. Also adjust totals if training etc. is held during the shift, and ensure you lock your timesheet daily once checked.